An Abyss of Dreams, developed by Studio Xian d'Or, is a classic point-and-click puzzle game in the same vein as something like Scratches or Asylum, and set in historical Quebec, Canada. The story takes place during a period known as the Great Darkness, which sounds way cooler than it actually was. In reality, it was roughly a 20-year stretch from the 1930s to the 1950s, when Quebec was under a hyper-conservative Catholic rule. During this time, French Canadians lived with constant religious guilt and anxiety, extreme loneliness, and, to quote, a sad and gloomy world where they lived in fear of sin. The game follows Therese and her little sister Hélène, who are being dropped off at a girls' orphanage by their uncle. The demo only covers the opening chapter, and so the amounts of story provided is fairly sparse, mostly introducing some of the other orphans and the nuns. But even in that short amount of time, you get more than a few hints about some very dark secrets, like, for example, a chimney that only seems to produce smoke whenever an orphan goes missing. You also get brief glimpses of the abuse the children face, from cages used as punishment, corporal punishment, and the especially unpleasant implications surrounding the so-called friendly nun, who wants to make our main character her special friend. That's the kind of subject matter that always makes me nervous. Like, it can go very, very wrong if handled poorly, but it can also be extremely impactful if done well. Visually, the game is pretty simple and nothing really stood out to me. The environments weren't especially visually unsettling, but they did feel very empty and cold. The dialogue plays out over stiff, unmoving character models with thousand-yard stares, although I guess that does unintentionally fit the tone. Where the game does aesthetically shine, though, is in its oppressive audio design. The halls are uncomfortably quiet, like not silent, but empty sounding. The underlying deep rumble of the boiler in every room, the loud ticking of clocks like a reminder of how slowly time is passing, and every footstep echoes through the halls, making you feel like the nuns are just always aware of where you are. It's claustrophobic, but also somehow leaves you feeling very exposed. Because everything is so quiet, every sound you do hear feels that much louder and more threatening. Like, the friendly nun who I mentioned before is disturbing enough on her own, but her introduction, which is accompanied only by the sharp, echoing chops of a kitchen knife, really underlines the subtle threatening and malicious intent behind her sweetened words. The puzzles were surprisingly tough for being simple find-the-object tasks. They really do force you to be attentive and thorough. A good chunk of my playtime was spent wandering around just looking for a girl's handkerchief, only to eventually find it sitting underneath a chair, although that really may say more about me than the game. If I have any criticisms of the demo, it's that I'd like to see some facial animations and lip syncing. It's not a deal breaker, but in a game where mood and atmosphere are everything, some more expressive faces would go a long way. The game is set to release on February 14th, so if you're a fan of Scratches or anything from Senscape, this is definitely one to keep an eye on.